So today you'll get to see the first site plan for this new high school that's going to be opening in 2024. We're so excited about it. Um, the way to ask questions will be using the Q&A tool, and we will post a little information about that again at the meeting if you didn't get to see it before. The chat is there if you have any technical problems. So attendees are automatically muted with cameras off. You can ask your question at any time during the presentation, but we may not get to it until the very end. We will read out all the questions that come through. And I'm going to mention this to panelists that we were having some video lagging issues. So when I introduce you, if you could please turn on your video and say hello. And then unless you're presenting or speaking, you can turn it on. If you do have any WebEx issues, their support team can be reached at 866-229-3239, extension 2, and then extension 1, and that is also in the chat. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the OCPS Facilities Communications YouTube page tomorrow, and it'll be sent out as a link to anyone who registered. So if you come onto this meeting part way, you'll still be able to go back and watch it later. So the presentation will be posted. So like the slides that you're watching will go up on facilities.ocps.net, and they'll also be on the OCPS board member page for board member Lopez. You'll be able to find it on her page too. Those will probably get up tomorrow. So before you hear these early design plans, before we get started, let's turn to your District 2 board member, Johanna Lopez, for some opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone. It is a great honor to be here tonight. Welcome to the Site 50 HSE2 30% Design Meeting. Tonight, you will receive valuable details on this construction. At the end, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Thank you for coming. Now I'm going to say the same thing in Spanish. Gracias por estar aquí esta noche, por estar en esta reunión de la construcción del 30% de la división 50HSE2. Así que gracias por estar aquí, bienvenidos. Pueden hacer preguntas al final y gracias por venir.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Johanna, you were saying that if someone wants to ask a question in Spanish, they can direct it to you and then you'll read it afterwards. Would that work?
Yes, yes. Sí, let me say it in Spanish. I didn't say it. Si tienes alguna pregunta en español, lo puedes hacer, entonces yo lo traduciría al inglés. Así que gracias. Now, I'll say it.
Okay, so you'll see a number of panelist boxes at the top or the side of your screen. These are members of the OCPS team or our municipal partners or the project team. I'm going to introduce a couple of the people who are here who will be able to answer questions afterward. So just to introduce myself, I'm Lauren Roth. I do communications for the facilities department with Orange County Public Schools. I do want to thank the Lake Nona High School team. I saw Principal Martha Chang was on here. They have been really supportive of us and hosted our first meeting. So the Executive Area Director for the High School Division, Todd Tremble, is on the line. So thanks for being here, Todd. The architect who's going to be making the whole design for this project, and it's not finished. We're still at a pretty early stage. That's Ziskovich, and they're in partnership with CT Shoe. So from Ziskovich, we have Mike McGuinn, who's going to be running the presentation tonight, Michael Erling, Don Hetzer, and Jose Morguido was here on the previous meeting, and you will see him again. He's a big part of this team. So building this project is going to be Core Construction. David Lewis is here. They're building it in partnership with Horace. And I know that Lena Graham Morris is part of that team and Grant Curtin. Our civil engineer on the project is the firm Klima Weeks, and representing Klima Weeks is Jay Klima. So, he's the one who can answer questions about, why the retention ponds are in a certain place and the runoff and that sort of thing. Traffic engineer is Avcon, and Clint Pletzer and Rick Baldacchi are representing Avcon. From the OCPS facilities team, the project manager is Cass Hurst. Now, Cass serves as a liaison between the OCPS team and both the architect and the construction manager, so kind of ties all these groups together. Our senior facilities executive director with OCPS facilities is Rory Salenbean. He's on the line. Mo Arthur, the design manager for the project management team, is on the line, as is our director of construction planning, Jessma Lambert. Christopher Mills, who's from our facilities planning team, is with us. Adam Zubritsky with OCPS Transportation. Mike Ennist with the Office of the Fire Marshal. And Commander Randy Durkee is on with OCPS Police. And I know Orlando Commissioner Jim Gray was either going to try to stop in or send somebody. And we also have several representatives from the city of Orlando. I know I saw Jacques Coulon come on and Tanika Niesman. So they're our municipal partners and we work really closely with them. And so if you didn't hear what I said at the very beginning, there have been some technical difficulties today. So if there's anybody, you know, who would be the person to answer a question who isn't on, we can always follow up with you at a later date and get you an answer to a question or at the next meeting. Our next meeting will be at the 60% design phase. So before I take too long, let me pass things back over to Mike McGuinn for you to see what they've been working on.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Just want to make sure I'm coming through okay and you can hear me all right? Great.
Yes.
So thank you. Let's click back to the presentation here. So first off, I wanted to thank everybody for attending today. The great input that we had in the first round meeting, and then today speaks volumes to the community, the leadership from Board Member Lopez, the local city and municipalities that are participating here. Without this, we could not be doing it, and we have an all-star team coming together on this. So really appreciate all of your effort, your great input and insights in helping us develop this fantastic new prototype school for Orange County Public Schools. So with that, we're going to share with you just a little bit of, and hopefully our bandwidth and everything else is working okay. The little bit of an aerial drone flight over the site. You can see that this is truly a spectacular location and site that we'll be developing for this new high school. It's perfectly situated and ready for this facility, and really is going to be something exciting that's coming to the district and to this area of the county. To share with you general location, many of you know this already, but for those that may not be aware as to the overall location, you can see here, this is just north of kind of the Lake Nona High School location. It'll be providing some relief from that area, east of the airport and so forth, and just south of the Beach Line Expressway, and the future rail line that's being constructed currently. And this area of the site here, you can see a little bit further blow up and detail here, that as we come into the site, you'll see that the new Brightline rail will be extending across the northern edge of it. We'll talk a little bit about the mitigation strategy for some of those items. And here you can see the Meridian Park development here that's going on around, and the site that will be located here just north and west of Dowden Road and the existing Founders Street that's been located here. With that, the development of the site was pre-planned with 2 access points, and it's kind of the most remote locations. And the reason that they're the most remote locations is there's wetland areas that are located on each side of the site, and we'll show that in a little bit further detail in just a moment. But this kind of gives you that orientation, understanding that the Brightline rail here is at the top. We're going to be switching the orientation in another couple of slides, so we could blow up the slide. The site is large as possible for you to see it, the detail that we're developing on it. But if you understand kind of where Dowden and Founders is at and the access points, these will all make a lot more sense as we go forward. So we want to explain that for just a moment. So as we were talking about before in the 2 street areas that we're going to be coming in off of, the native wetlands that are here and the existing body of water that's here at this location, part of this development, you'll notice when we go to the site, we're going to be relocating that to the north to maintain the connection between the 2 native wetlands, and then making room for the development of the high school site. Buffers will be created along the southern edge, so you'll notice that some of those dark lines that dashed in along this edge were natural buffers along this area, but this is the area that we will also be targeting to come in off of the site and to the two more remote locations, one here off to the east off of Dowden. You'll see here, this is the a bus entrance, and then the access for students and parents here off to the left-hand side. So as I was mentioning before, obviously this is in an area that is in rapid growth and development, development of Meridian Park, and you can see here this central location for the new school coming right off of Dowden. This area is just absolutely beautiful with the landscapes, as you saw in the drone footage, the wildlife, the wetlands, and so forth. And we're really carrying that into kind of the thought process of how we're going to developing the site and the views and access and so forth, and taking advantage of the natural beauty of the site and the overall context of the design. Some of the statistics for the site, it will be developed for 3,240 students. There's approximately 61.5 acres across the site, but as you can see, some of those areas will be reduced based off of some of the development that's needed for retention areas, as Lauren mentioned, and some of the natural buffer areas and so forth, and we'll go over those in just a moment. The approximate budget for the project is $120 million for construction, and the targeted opening is for the fall of 2024. So with the process of designing the site, there's lots of great elements that are going to be included, and we talked a little bit about this at the last discussion. But in general, all the normal pieces of classrooms and science labs and art labs and so forth, but also performing arts labs, the auditorium, you'll have a full gymnasium, all the athletic amenities that will be provided as part of that, including some very exciting CTE programs that are being developed by the district for this site, the car loop and bus loop, visitor parking areas and so forth, and all the safety and security elements that go into designing high school for Orange County Public Schools will all be there. Some of the key additional items there are the sustainable building systems and approach that will be developed for the site. You can see down here, and the net zero energy ready. We'll talk a little bit more about that and some of the sustainability functions of the project. But in general, what we're trying to do is reduce basically as much as we can the energy footprint for the building and the use of the school, and be as responsible as we can with the design to create a sustainably designed site and building for the future of this high school. Some of the innovations that are coming in, 21st century learning, collaborative spaces, collaborative learning environments, that will go from not only the design of the site to the design of the building, down to the furniture that's selected and so forth. So that will be a key focus in how the site and the building have been planned. Safety and security is paramount, making sure that students and faculty, as well as visitors, are provided with a safe and secure environment with all of the latest technology and systems. We talked a little bit about the sustainability and the focus that the district has, and obviously reducing the energy footprint for the facility, and therefore some of the long-term operational costs. Health and wellness will be a key focus factor for the development of the design in providing for healthy environments, as well as the kind of wellness programs, athletic programs that are provided within the campus. Community-based school is another item that we're going to talk about in just a little bit with the community responses to the surveys. The school is being planned, as we'll share with you in a few minutes, with those community-based functions being provided in convenient areas and access to allow for safe and secure access for the community to utilize the facility and have shared events and resources. And so we'll share that with you a little bit. It will be technology rich, as all the OCPS schools are and are being developed with the latest in Wi-Fi coverage and systems and devices and so forth to develop and enrich the educational environment. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, some of the career academies that will be provided here in the CTE programs will be latest and cutting edge and go into sustainability and technology, and so forth, and we'll share those with you in just a moment. We can move on. This is where we were at kind of at the last meeting, if you may recall. Some of the visioning process that's happened, we took that input and that visioning overall strategy, and a series of survey questions were posed, not only during the discussion in the meeting last time, but also allowed for community to have input at various levels. So what we've done is we've taken these questions and things like what are the features that we liked best about the existing facilities, things that weren't turning out so well or weren't like things that could be developed in the new design for preparing our students and our kids for the future, as well as providing input as to what you'd like to see in kind of new schools and community activities and community spaces being provided. All of those elements and those questions that we asked, we received input not only at the meeting, but also at the as follow-up and remote access, and then the online survey. So we took all of those components and compiled them and started to analyze and look at what are the common threads. And that's what we've done here today, is to take those elements and look at what those survey results basically came out of. With that, the idea and some of the big key features were developing collaborative areas and collaboration elements within the overall design, sustainability, creating community assembly areas, addressing directly the traffic and considerations that schools bring to the communities that they're in, and then looking at how the courtyard is a central element in the design of many of the high schools for our region, but also for OCPS, and how can we design a school around allowing for those spaces to be captured and provided within the new design. So let me go through some of those elements in more detail and share with you some of the comments that were provided and how those elements will be incorporated. I believe we had on average approximately 85 responses per question. I mean, that's just phenomenal. And again, thank you to the community and obviously to the leadership that helped support providing this input. Really a great job. So with that, the courtyard areas, some of the input that we received was to have a large central open courtyard area, not only for circulation, but also providing areas for outdoor classrooms, events, places for students to connect in kind of a natural environment. And so you can see here, the kind of picture up to the right-hand side will be generally representative of some of the development and thinking that we're going to show you on the site plan as to how the building will be kind of put together in general, of creating those outdoor spaces to not only allow students to communicate and cross connect with the various pieces of the building, but also so events and outdoor learning can happen as well. Collaboration, looking for spaces that allow for hands-on working environments, community building with classrooms and flex labs and so forth, flexible technology, movable seating to allow students to rearrange their components in their areas to allow for various types and sizes of groups. You see some of the representative pictures there with students collaborating and looking at and working in different types of environments. And so all of those things will be factored into the design of the new facility. Sustainability was a very interesting component in different items, then really aspirational as to the items that were requested. The idea of net zero energy was requested, and one of the things that we noted earlier was being net zero ready. So the idea there is to really try to develop a compact building footprint, a really well-designed, efficient skin for the facility, and reduce some of the needs for some of the energy usage, and then provide for the capacity for the future of net zero. With that, it kind of goes hand in hand with the overall site development and design, including trying to preserve the wetlands conservation. We're going to show you what the thinking is there on the site, utilizing xeriscaping and rainwater harvesting, trying to really kind of reduce our water usage on the site and allow for that wetland recharge in the surrounding areas. We'll talk to you a little bit about that when we get to the site plan. Providing the assembly spaces. We know that this will be a community-based school and providing the central gathering points for not just for operations of the school, but for after hours use, such as the auditorium, gymnasium, media center and student union type space, the dining commons, and all of the courtyard. And you'll see how we're thinking of organizing the spaces similar to that courtyard concept to allow for those assembly functions to have prime use and ease of use for after hours use by the community. And so that's a key function in the design to allow it to have an extended life. Site circulation, this is a common theme for all schools. And so thinking about how we can provide for safe site entry, ample car and bus loop drop-off areas, ample areas for parking to accommodate some of the events, not only the day-to-day usage for staff and for students. So all of those elements have been factored into the design of the site. Looking at this, and we'll share with you in just a moment. Lunch options, and that was an interesting one, is that food and health and wellness and so forth and all of those things that the district is always cognizant of will be developed here and providing the best options for how that would be maintained. And then one of the things that was also noted was the potential of having distributed functions to allow for ease of circulation and access. And we'll share with you a little bit more about that as to the overall functions. And that what that will do is we'll likely have a central location that we're making the food, but it will allow for those distribution points to be distributed throughout select areas of the campus to facilitate not only for lunch period, but potentially for after hours use, but it will also allow for the circulation to be easier, access for students to get their lunch in an efficient timing and pattern, as well as providing obviously the healthy options for students at all times. Next items are really deal with computer and digital help center. This is kind of that genius bar idea, that the as we go towards increased use of technology, especially at the high school level, the idea of having an area that is focused on helping students have develop either repair conditions or identify problems and fix those areas so they can maintain their academic progress and utilize their technology. So specialized areas being programmed and fit into the overall design. Community use, we talked a little bit about that early on in some of those assembly functions, but also allowing for after hours use, the athletic amenities and so forth to function in a convenient way with access to parking, so forth, as well as this facility will be designed as an EHPA area to support the local community. So as we get to the site design, again, as I mentioned to you before, the site's rotated here 90 degrees to the left. So that kind of boot shape, as you may have recalled earlier, here you'll notice that the bright line rail that was up at the top is now shifted over here to the left-hand side. But this allows us to kind of enlarge the site plan and kind of run through a couple of the key components that we have here for the overall layout of the facility. You'll notice Dowden here is up to the top right, and then the Founders Street along this edge. You'll notice that we're trying to provide as much natural buffer along Founders Street. We've moved then the central area of the existing wetland areas to the back of the site, allowing for the retention, and then a natural enhanced buffer along this edge with a security wall, but also allowing for water and stormwater areas in the native wetlands to have connection back between the two native wetlands and allow for that connection of the water surfaces. So with that, the school is provided at the basically fronting towards that corner, the central corner of Dowden and Founders with a civic presence. We've provided a main school entrance off of that area. And so now we're going to run through how some of the other site development kind of informs that. Yellow line that was just added provides for areas to allow for a safe and secure site, areas for the public to enter, for others to enter into the site, but then having a secure back of house area for students and for faculty. And so that will provide safety and security. Access into the site, you'll notice the concern with traffic and so forth in the access. The parents and students will come in. Student parking is here just off of the loop, and then the extended drop-off and queuing that will be provided, and then obviously the exit queue that will be provided for student drop-off along the south end of the site here off to the right-hand side. And then the buses are coming in off the east side of the site off of Dowden, coming in, circulating around and providing a drop-off. All those areas then allowing for access into the courtyard during the morning and afternoon periods for drop-off and pickup, and then accessing into the school. And we've provided basically all of the athletic amenities here to the rear of the site with a full stadium and track, practice fields, the baseball, softball, basketball, as well as access for potential expansion and so forth. All of those items created in this area to allow for an efficient site design and allow for all those athletic amenities to then be utilized parking that's immediately adjacent. We'll share with you in just a little bit the idea of where some of the larger function areas as far as the gymnasium, the auditorium, and so forth are also conveniently located near the parking areas to allow for those functions to happen as well. So to go into a little bit more about the new OCPS prototype high school that we're developing together, there will be educationally, there's going to be new CTE programs and flexible lab areas, some of the flex studios that will allow studio spaces to be combined and separated and give a lot of flexibility to the educators to operate programs and create connections between various subject matters as well as various functions for students. The student unions and commons dining room that's going to be developed will allow for larger group settings as well as for a central gathering point that will not only use the courtyard but also utilize some interior areas for students to collaborate. Technology will be developed within the entire facility, both interior and exterior coverage, to allow for Wi-Fi access as well as all of the latest interactive technology for educational environments that the district is so keen on making sure that they're up to date on. Energy efficiency, as we talked about earlier, about being net zero ready, enhancing the exterior envelope and providing high efficiency mechanical systems to make sure the interior environment is as high quality as possible. The other items with reference to security and some of the site design with a single point of entry, as we pointed out earlier, as well as full security system with card access and cameras, emergency radio systems, and so forth, field any event. All those elements in the latest design standards for the district will be incorporated in the new high school. So in general, the student capacity, as we talked about earlier, was about 3,240 students for the high school, plus or minus approximately 380,000 square feet. Some of the program areas that we've talked about and gone through the programming phases include all the sort of typical pieces, but we wanted to show you some representative examples of similar types of spaces, such as a media center that will have access to lots of technology and resources and so forth. The cafeteria that we noted down here, which will have a central distribution point and serving areas, but we'll also have some remote locations both within and outside of the dining room to allow for some of the extended dining areas to be utilized. We'll go to the next slide. Science labs with access to all the latest technology and systems to function for the curriculum that OCPS is looking at providing, as well as the flex studios and so forth and technology-rich environments. All of those will be incorporated within the facility. For the arts, the auditorium will function and will be designed kind of as a multi-use type facility, not only for the arts and performances and so forth, but also for lectures, for community meetings and so forth. So we'll have a lot of different uses for the community and the school. And art lab areas and art programs will all be providing for flexible, adaptable use spaces to accommodate the various functions that will be going on there. Full array of all the art spaces, including band, vocal, orchestra, piano, dance, and so forth, along with the art labs will be provided. The athletic amenities are definitely going to be rich here as far as full gymnasium, weight room that will be provided for all students, wrestling rooms, locker rooms, field house, and so forth. Other amenities to the site will all be provided in this latest high school prototype. To speak to some of the elements on the site, we talked about, and we wanted to show some of the representative examples of images of some of the other schools that have been developed, such as the full stadium and track with all of the home and away bleachers, so forth. The field house will be provided. 2 practice fields are planned for this facility and site layout currently. A full baseball field and softball field with its representative concessions and locker room areas as well as tennis courts and some outdoor basketball courts as well for both PE functions and for other practices. Cars and buses will be accommodated, as we pointed out earlier. Extended queue lengths on site above the district standards are going to be provided here. We have plus or minus 990 spaces on site provided to accommodate for faculty, for students, and for visitors to make sure that we have all accommodations accounted for. Shade and greenhouse will also be part of the overall program and developed as part of the CTE program and plant sciences and so forth. And so those elements will be included in the site design as well. Some of the safety, security, and healthy environment elements that we wanted to talk about a little bit about. As I mentioned before, single point of entry is going to be key. That's the simple part as far as providing kind of primary and secondary fence lines to develop those areas of defining a safe and secure campus. But in addition to that, security systems, camera systems, card reader access, 2-way emergency radio systems will be provided in the facility, all with latest technology that the district is utilizing. But we can't be not cognizant of the time that we're building in and this unique period in the world's history as far as pandemic and so forth. So providing for increased exterior dining areas for open air environments, increasing ventilation capability of our systems, and then the district has always gone with great filtration systems and for filters for the mechanical units. And so all those elements will be incorporated into the current design and thinking for the facility. Educational technology we talked about a little bit earlier, touchscreen displays with audio enhancement, wireless access and connectivity throughout the facility and each of the spaces. That's increasingly challenging to a lot of different facilities, but the district is making sure that that element is provided in a robust way for this campus. So some of the key sustainability features, the building will be generally designed and with the intent of meeting Green Globe standards and so forth. But really one of the big pieces here is to provide a high performance envelope and really reduce the energy footprint for the campus. That will include not only providing for daylight harvesting and Energy Star rated equipment, but also allowing for the thermal design and efficiency of the windows, the doors, the glazing, and so forth at the envelope to be maximized. When we do that, we really lower the hurdle for the amount of energy that will be utilized in the facility, and that really kind of prepares us for getting as close to having a net zero ready type facility with having a very efficient and low EUI. So that will all be composed and developed as part of the overall design. So schedule-wise, where are we at now in general? We started some of the design and programming and so forth in August. We met with you several months ago, and here we are in January. We are in the throes of the design. Some of the site planning and designing is already taken place. We're in the process of the schematic design currently and moving through it fairly quickly. The target here is to allow for some of the early site prep to take place and be prepared so that the new campus construction can happen, all with the target of having things constructed prior to the summer of 2024, allowing the district time to move in and hopefully get open then for August of 2024. So everything is working and on schedule for that delivery. So with that, I'll thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Lauren to facilitate for any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much to Michael and all the team. And I also want to thank those of you who've already put questions in the Q&A. Mike, if you could go forward one slide. Those of you who weren't on at the very beginning probably haven't seen this slide. So this is the way to add questions. We already have more than two dozen questions in. So I'm going to start jumping straight into them. Some of them were answered during the meeting, and so those that were, I'll just read the answers. And I'm also going to combine similar questions. Okay, so we had a couple comments and questions about how the high school size was determined and what we can do about preventing portables. And one actually really exciting thing is that this is the first of a new high school prototype, and it's actually being built larger than our standard original prototype of 2700 that we were using for almost 2 decades. So Mike, do you think you could hop back to the slide that showed the size? Like the stats.
The stats and size.
A little bit further back.
Here.
Oh, you've got it there too. I see. 3240.
Yes.
So the capacity of the school will be 3,240. For that reason, the idea being that if we think that that many students are going to end up being zoned there, that we'll have the space for them. There was a question of whether the school could open earlier. And actually the school was scheduled for 2025 opening, August 2025, and it's going to open in August 2024 now. Can't be moved any sooner than that because as you might have seen in the timeline toward the end, we need that time to design and build the school. We've already started that process. So that process is already underway. There were a couple questions about what single entry point means. And that's actually a reference to people walking into the school, not a reference to people driving in. So where the star is, am I right about that, Mike? That the star is where that single secured entry is, correct?
That's correct. And so to add to that just a little bit, Lauren, the single point of entry is so that when drop off and pickup is happening, obviously those will be monitored and the openings will come in and students will be, brought into the facility. Once that closes, the gates will be closed, the elements will be closed, and all visitors and everyone will be directed to that central point of entry so they can be checked in and made sure that no one's entering the campus that they should not be.
And that's something that's on all of our OCPS schools now, elementary, middle, high, that we direct visitors through that one front office area where they have to be buzzed in. And so that's what that's referring to. It's not referring to a vehicular entry because as you can see on this slide, there are 2 of those. There was a question that, I think was answered is the only entry on Dowden. And as you can see, there is a second entry on Founders Street. Could you just, for Mike, for people who logged on late, could you explain the difference between those 2 entrances and what each one is for?
Sure. So the entrance off of Dowden will be for staff entering as well as the buses, and you'll see it here with the dashed white line that they'll come around, and then they'll be dropping off here so that students can then enter into the courtyard and then enter into the facility. For the southern point off of Founders, parents and students will be coming in off of that location, following around and utilizing the extended queue so we can bring as many cars on campus as possible. Students will then be parking here and then entering into the facility. Down along the frontage here, we have our visitor parking along this edge, again, to facilitate the single point of entry. So visitors would come down, park, and then come into the main administration at this location during drop-off and pickup. Parents will be picking up and dropping off students along this edge.
Great, thank you. And you actually anticipated a question that came in while you were speaking, which was about where the visitors park. So thank you for pointing that out. Commander Durkee, are you in a position where you can speak? Can you unmute possibly?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Someone was asking how we protect for unwanted individuals on campus. Can you speak generally about how our campuses are secured and what the SROs do?
Sure. We have a couple different layers. One of the obviously the perimeter fencing of the establishment. We have cameras that also are, situated in an area where staff and SROs can watch the perimeters of the campus for entry points and things like as well. Obviously, staff members are trained on the proper methodologies for identifying potential vulnerabilities to the campus, and we obviously have several layers of security, including a single point of entry that minimizes the ability for somebody just to wander onto campus.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, I think there are a few questions here that were answered on this slide, where the student parking is, whether there's more than one entrance. But Clint, I think I've got a couple questions that are for you. They wanted to know, and this was a couple of different people asked about this in different ways. They wanted to know how the number of spaces were determined, and what's required by code, and whether we're exceeding code and why. So let me know if you need me to repeat any of that.
Basically, there is a code for the amount of spots per population, and the good thing for this is we are exceeding the amount of spaces per the required code quite significantly. I might have to defer to Mike to give the exact number of spaces. I think he had that information, but there's a code that's set forth, and we're well and above those code limits.
Okay, and one of the people asking about this wanted to know why we choose to go over. Would that be a Mo question?
I think it's more of what we
Okay.
see in other public schools in the area, and the code says one thing, but we see more people coming to schools. At like Nona High School, we reviewed like Nona High School to see how many people were driving there, and we see a few more than the code requires. So we're trying to plan for a worst case scenario where it wouldn't be the worst thing to have a few extra spaces, but it's tough to not have enough.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. Someone asked if the baseball and softball fields would be lighted, and yes, they will be. Okay, Clint, here's another one for you. How large are Darden and Founders in terms of lanes?
Say that again.
How many lanes are Dowden Road and how many lanes is Founders Street?
Currently, Dowden Road is a 4-lane roadway. It's going to have a left turn lane in the median. Currently, Founders is a 2-lane roadway, but due to the increased traffic of coming into the school, there are plans to improve Founder Street to add more lanes, especially in the westbound direction for people entering the school.
And Clint, while I've got you, I'm going to ask a question that I bet some people are thinking. Can you explain why we put why did we use bus and staff on Dowden, and why did we do student entry on Founders? Like, why did we do it in that direction?
Sure. So first, we want to say that in cooperation with the city, and like there was a lot of meetings before that, so that the public knows that we have examined flipping the scenarios where bringing the students in off Dowden and the buses in off Founders. And we've looked at that scenario, and we've looked at the scenario that's shown now where the students come in off Founders and the buses are off Dowden. And what we found was there's not enough queue space between the Founders intersection and the entrance to the off of Dowden to make that work. That traffic is too much for the amount of turn lane space that we have. And so that's the reason we chose to bring people off of Founders. If you look at the distance between Dowden along Founders to the entrance of the school, it's much longer. So that gives us a lot more time to put in turn lanes and to queue people so that they aren't spilling back into the roadways and creating traffic impacts to the general public. And so that's the main reasons.
Great, thank you so much. There were a couple questions about zoning, so I'm going to group those together. There were questions of when it was going to be zoned and who's going to be zoned in and how that'll all work, and who will go to the new school. And so let me just lump those all together. So the school is opening in 2024, but it is opening only with freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. So students who will be seniors the year that the school opens will not attend. They will stay at their current high school so that they can finish out their education there. And then, you know, in terms of whether a student has to attend, that would depend on whether they had a transfer. So if your student is zoned to this school and you don't want them to attend, that is something that you could see what the options are through student enrollment. There might be a transfer possibility that would mean that they would go to a different high school. So that would be kind of a case by case thing. The zoning is usually determined about a year out of the school opening. It's not done at this point, and it won't be done for quite a while. And the reasoning for that is because, as you guys know, this is an area that's growing, and the more of those houses that actually exist before the zoning happens, the more accurately and precisely it can be zoned. All right, there's a question on, are the home stands for the football stadium on the west facing east? Mike, is that something you can help with, or someone else on the Ziskovich team?
That's an element that we are, this is Mike. That's an element we're looking at and reviewing right now. Currently, what you see on the graphic, yes, it is shown here on the east side facing back west. We are moving that, and it will be placed here on the west side facing back towards the stadium.
So that's going to be switched?
Reversed, that's correct.
Reversed. Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. There's a question whether the CTE Flex Labs will be designed so they could do robotics. I don't know if we know that at this point, either Mo or the Ziskovich team.
Lauren, we are looking at some CTE programs such as Project Lead the Way that can contain the robotics program. So it's something that we're still working through, but more than likely we will have CTE programs that potentially will contain robotics.
Great, thank you. Now there's some operational questions. Todd, are you on the line and able to unmute?
Yes, I'm here, Lauren.
Okay, thank you. There was a question about, you know, what sort of programs there will be, including whether there will be a swim team. Are there certain sports that are standard versus, you know, determined by the principal?
Yeah, there are sports that are standard, and we expect this school to be able to swim.
Todd, we're having a hard time hearing you. Can you get closer to your mic?
I'm having trouble with my so yeah, we truly expect the school to have a swim team. Basic sports that all schools have. And
okay, so let me just repeat that back. That yes, we expect the school to have a swim team because that's one of the standard sports for high schools.
correct.
And Todd, if there's anything you want to text me or anything in addition, I can always read that out. Okay, there's a question about the, you know, in a typical high school cafeteria, there could potentially be loud events with music in the cafeteria during lunch. Is there an issue? Could could the students there be disrupting the classes that are nearby? And is that something that we're paying attention to in the design? Mo, would that be a question for you?
Hey, Lauren. The question is, will there be?
So the question was, would sound from, you know, a loud event during the middle of the school day in the cafeteria, would that be detrimental to nearby classrooms? Like, you know, would be loud and disruptive?
Yeah, so as part of the design, it's part of our standard that around the classrooms, we make sure that we have adequate sound separation from adjacent spaces. So that's something that will be considered to mitigate any of that.
Fantastic. And this next question, I don't know if this would be you or if it would be Rory, but there was a question about what sort of Wi-Fi access we provide, you know, kind of what's built into the backbone. If anybody, I'm not sure who that would go to exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
So just in general, we do have Wi-Fi throughout the campus. So basically wherever there are student occupied spaces, there will be Wi-Fi available, if that addresses the question.
Okay. And there's also a question that's a little bit different about emergency radios, so that they'll work on campus. Again, I would think Mo or Rory might be the right person.
Yeah, I think that was the question about DOS, and that is a
Yes.
district standard that will be incorporated into this campus.
Okay, great. Okay, so there's a question of, how founders and Dowden are positioned, and you can see on the screen here that they're perpendicular. There was a question, will each floor be designated for a particular grade? And no, they will not be, because, it's a 3-story school and we've got 4 grades. So that's not the way that high schools are typically set up. There's a question about visitor parking. I think that was addressed. Will there be external stairs? So I'm starting to get to questions that came after the meeting ended. So I don't necessarily know if they've been answered. So if anyone on the team can just chime in on these, I'd appreciate it. There was a question about whether there will be external stairwells to the upstairs from the courtyard. Do we know that at this point? Because I know if you envision, a lot of our more recently built high schools, the 3-story classroom building has stairwells, up from the courtyard that are external. Will we be able to continue doing that?
Hi, Lauren. This is Mike from Ziskovich. So it's an item that we're reviewing right now in the schematic design, and we are contemplating utilizing those for access back towards the courtyard areas. So we're evaluating those currently with the district.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I do want to tell the group that this is a relatively early stage of design, where we're 30% through the design process. The next community meeting that we're going to have will be at 60% design. So you'll see more complete designs at that point. But we like to have meetings, especially with a high school, at multiple way stations along the way, so that we can be getting community input and questions all along the way. There's a question about, getting to see this presentation or the PowerPoint. So yes, the PowerPoint will be posted tomorrow at facilities.ocps.net. It'll also be on ocps.net on board member Lopez's page. In addition, this video of this meeting will be on YouTube. So anybody who registered for this meeting, I'm automatically going to send you a link to those. Okay, now we've got a question about the HVAC system. Maybe Mo, that would be you. In light of COVID, what specific modifications will be made to the HVAC system?
So Lauren, that's something that we're constantly looking at and evaluating on all of our campuses. But we are looking at the filtration systems and upgrades and modifications to that in light of what we have going on today.
Great, thank you. So I don't know, maybe this is a Jay Klima question. What was considered in terms of noise pollution? Is there anything we looked into on that?
Oh, Miss Lauren, that's not necessarily a Jay question, but I will say this. I mean, we did certainly locate the track and football stadium and the baseball fields and softball fields to the north to provide as much buffer from the residential as possible. And we also have wetlands on either side, so it's actually nestled in there pretty nice to be able to provide both a visual and a noise buffer as much as possible.
See, it sounds like a Jay question to me with that kind of answer, so.
Thanks.
Question about community use of school amenities after school hours. The OCPS child safety protocols permit for community members who do not have a student enrolled in the school to be on premises after school hours and use school facilities. Okay, I think the simple answer to that is if they're coming to a community event, yes. I don't know if there's a more elaborate question, more elaborate answer that someone wants to add on, but we don't do, badging or, things like that. There are many churches who use some of our spaces, but that would be, at a time that school is not going on. So yes, there's definitely, we have a whole community use process. There's like a website called Facilitron with all of our existing schools where, you know, spaces can be rented and that sort of thing. So that's a district-wide thing. So there's a question, you know, my kids will be juniors in 2024. Will they attend this school or Lake Nona? Well, we don't know because the zoning hasn't occurred yet. But that is something that when that process begins, there are definitely opportunities for public comment on what those lines will be. But if you are zoned for this school as a junior, you would go unless your family gets a transfer for you to attend a different school, such as, you know, remaining at Lake Nona for some reason. Okay, I think I answered the question about the recording. Okay, what will prevent someone from parking at the student parking lot and getting in? Well, and Commander, you can add to this if you want, but I think the answer is that during the school day, all of those doors become locked down, and they would have to come through the front office where the start is and check in and, you know, get a badge, and, you know, they would have to pass through security to come inside.
Yeah, and the access points into the parking areas are usually controlled by a security officer or a security attendant who monitors vehicles that come into the campus. The way this campus footprint is uniquely laid out, it's going to provide a lot of natural barriers for people being able to access those lots. And once again, to access from the parking lots into the school, you have to bypass the fenced-in areas, which will be gated off.
Thank you. And Todd, if you could text me the answer to this one and then I'll come back to it. Will there be classes offered with college accreditation? Yes, I'm not quite sure how you want me to address that one. If you don't mind texting me that, I'll then read it out. All right. Are there plans for security cameras to be placed at strategic locations around the facility? Yes. Yes is the answer to that. That's an OCPS standard. Most high schools have a barn for students that participate in agri-science and FFA. Will this be considered for this site? We saw the greenhouse photo, but will an open air or closed barn be considered as well? Mo, is that a design standard now? I know that there are those programs, but physically what goes with them?
So we look at that that's site specific. So we do not have a barn in the program for this campus.
Okay. All right. There is a comment from the individual who asked about why we exceed the parking requirements. He said, I would urge OCPS to reconsider its stance that exceeding parking requirements is a good thing. More parking spots equals more cars equals more congestion. Clint, can you address this? Because I don't think that's quite, I mean, the number of cars is really determined by how many students attend the school more so than the number of parking spots, right? And then if you have an event, you need, you know, a certain number of spots for everyone to be able to come. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. The number of people who are going to come are going to come no matter what. The kids aren't going to come and stop driving to school because they don't have a spot. They're just going to have to push them into overflow spots, parking in the grass, parking in the practice fields. So you're not going to stop somebody from coming by not having a parking spot for them. The parking spot just provides, an adequate place to keep them secure, keep them safe, keep them in the designated area where there is supervision, where there is fencing. So creating an additional spot doesn't add to the congestion. And again, codes are set up with the best intentions, but like I said previously, we documented other OCPS high schools in the area and look at how many people are driving to them and look at how many people are parking and that's where we came up with the number of spaces by typical similar schools with similar populations.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read an answer to the college accreditation question from Mr. Tremble, but then I want to pause and ask Johanna if she's gotten any questions in Spanish. So from Todd, yes, there will be classes that if students successfully complete will afford college credit, such as advanced placement. In addition, there are also dual enrollment opportunities at our high schools. And Johanna, have you gotten any questions specifically to you in Spanish?
I don't see any question here. Do you want me to summarize something or to say something in Spanish that you think it will be you know
Do you mind
maybe
saying, do
necessary
you
or
mind I'm sorry. Do you mind reiterating in Spanish that if they have a specific question they'd like to pose in Spanish, the same thing you said at the beginning,
yes,
but for
yes,
people who
yes.
came on later? Yes.
Sure, yes, ma'am. Si tienen alguna pregunta en español, se pueden sentir cómodos en escribir para nosotros poderlas contestar, así que siéntase libre de escribir cualquier duda que tenga. Feel free to, I just say that feel free to write the question in Spanish so we can translate.
Awesome, thank you. And Principal Chang from Lake Nona wanted to add to the answer on parking. I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can. As far as parking concerned, so I can tell you that what I'm dealing with right now is we've literally run out of parking. So the more parking you have, the better. So just something to consider. And I know it's more congestion, but what happens is when you run out of parking, kids tend to park in the streets, and for us, they're parking in the neighboring businesses, which the businesses aren't happy. So if you're in a school where you don't have businesses, what's going to happen is they're going to be parking in your homes, like not necessarily in your homes, but on the streets of your homes, and that might end up being congestion for your homes.
Thank you. That's some, real life perspective right there. So thank you. So I know
Lauren,
it's
Lauren, this is Jessima. One other thing concerning parking is we have to plan for future growth via portables. And on this site and all of our prototypes, we plan for 12 additional portables, but there's probably going to be room for more, but on the site plan, it's for 12. At Lake Nona has over 40 portables. So yeah, there's going to be a parking issue there, but once the school is built and the zones are more even, that should alleviate parking situation in Lake Nona.
great. Thank you. And just, the portables are kind of positioned next to the basketball courts on the map, but that doesn't necessarily mean the school open with them, right?
Correct. It's just part of our standard to plan for future growth. But with this school, when we discussed it in advanced planning with our demographer, it is planned as this size to handle long-term growth in the area. So day one, you're not going to see 3,200 students there. It's for the area to grow and the kids to grow into the school. So we're trying to alleviate as much as possible having future portables.
Great, thank you. And Board Member Lopez had to drop off. I'm sure there are participants who have to jump off, but let's see if we can get through the rest of the questions so that if people come back to watch the recording later, if their question hasn't been addressed yet, they can still hear it. So let me go through the rest of the questions we've gotten. Will Dowden Road expand beyond the school or will it end at the school? The answer is Dowden Road will eventually be extended beyond the school to the east. It was asked whether there'll be indoor and outdoor stairs to get to the different floors, and it says it was mentioned a little bit earlier that is something that's being looked at, but seems to be likely. All right, okay. So there's a question if whether the zoning will be based on what elementary school the child currently attends, and no, it's not. Though student enrollment tries to do zoning around the lines of, say middle school attendance zones, it doesn't always work out that way. So that's not necessarily the case. And that may not happen with elementary school lines either. They really look at, where the growth is, how far from the school students would have to be coming. So there are a lot of different factors they look at, but I don't want to go any further beyond that because it's not my expertise area, and because there will be separate meetings dedicated specifically to zoning where you can ask all of those sorts of questions and make suggestions and provide feedback. Okay, we had gotten a question on, oh, interesting. Can someone describe the kind of library envisioned for the facility? Like, I think maybe the question is versus physical books versus computer labs. Mike, is that something you can speak to a little bit about what a modern high school library looks like?
Sure. And Mo may want to add to this a little bit as well. The district's going through that right now, is reimagining what the library 2.0 it will be basically in the media center. And basically what that means is that, yes, there will be some reduction in some of the physical resources of books and so forth, and more towards collaborative and content development and so forth. And the district's looking at that with the use of technology and systems and so forth, providing more collaborative types of environments for students. So all of that is being developed in coordination with the district.
Great, thank you. So there's another question about public accessibility. And yes, our high schools do have the ability to rent spaces afterward, after school closes or on the weekend. But I think this question might be more along the lines of like, will there be public use for like the track and the stadium? I think that might be kind of the question. So I don't know if that's something Jessima or Rory might be able to help address. Like, would the track be open? Is that something that would be a determination of the school administration? I wasn't sure if we had a standard policy on that.
Lauren, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the question was along the lines of like, the track. Will it automatically be open after school? Is there like a set district policy on that? Is it operational?
I think it's more operational.
Operational decision. Okay. And so we wouldn't know that at this point. And there was a question about school hours. I would say it's probably a little bit early on that, just because there are some pilots going on with school hours at our current high schools right now. Okay, so related question. How many teachers would support a school of this size? About 200. And so I'm gonna also ask Todd about the school hours, but I just don't think we know yet at this point. Will zoning be a forum with Q&A? Yes, it'll be a public meeting. How high will the fence be to the retention pond? Is that something Jay or Mike could? Oh, yes, I see it. The answer's already here. The ponds have a 6-foot high fence planned around them. Can the community volunteer to assist with move-in? That's an interesting question. Generally speaking, like all the furniture will, the physical items that, have to be in the school for it to open will already be handled. Whether individual teachers might need help would be, I think, something to figure out a little bit closer in. That's a good question. How do we prevent parking in our residential area? Okay, so part of that is having enough parking on site, but then also sometimes with sites, when a school site comes in, there's some signage that ends up being needed in the areas around, indicating no parking unless you're a resident. So we do have our partners with the city on the line. I don't know if anybody would like to address what the process is for that or how that typically works in the city. Or Christopher? Okay, well, if anyone wants to jump in on that. Oh yeah, go
Hi,
ahead.
this is Jacques Coulon with the City of Orlando. So
Great, thanks.
with the City of Orlando Transportation, and if we find once the school is open, and we find that there are parking issues in the neighborhood, the residents, the school, whomever can contact our traffic studies group, and then we'd look to see what are the issues. Is it people parking where they shouldn't be, already shouldn't park? Is it a signage or an enforcement issue? So once it's up and running, we have a whole process that we go through to kind of dig in before we start, just putting up no parking signs, just to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to affect the habits that are going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the school, it will have school officers assigned to it. They're a big help in that sort of thing. If there are violations of the law going on, if people are parking in an area that they're not supposed to be in, our SROs do work with the local police authorities, with the Orlando Police handle anything like that. So there's someone asking about, why are future portables being marked? Okay, so I think I want to try to simplify this, but student enrollment goes up and then down. It tends to peak after an area is built out and then drop slowly over time. And so if we're trying to design the school for about how big it's going to settle into for most of the years that it's open, then when it goes over those numbers, it could temporarily need portables. That'll be a really good question for student enrollment, and hopefully I'm doing kind of some justice to them, but that's generally the reason. You want to build the school to the size that it needs to be for the long term, not what it needs to be for a year or two. Do we have an estimate of when we'll be at 60% design? Could someone either with Ziskovich or Jesma or whoever might be familiar with the project timeline help me out with when we would hit 60%?
I think Mo would know, or someone from Ziskovich.
Okay. When do we think we'll hit 60% design approximately? Look and see if I have that on the schedule. And then I want to try to wrap this up because I know that, we're taking a lot of people's time, but let's see if we have that projected. I do not have a date on that, but what I'll do is I'll put out an email to the group, everybody who logged in today, and let you know.
Hi, Lauren,
yes,
this is Mike. I apologize. I just couldn't get my mute to come off. But yes, we're looking at several months from now. We'll be coming back with a 60% design presentation to meet and coordinating, obviously, that through your office to make sure the community has the proper notice and awareness.
Thank you. And I did also hear back from Area Superintendent Tremble, Executive Area Director, that current high school hours are approximately 7:20 to 2:20, except for Wednesday early release. So if that stays the same, that would be the hours. Yes, there's bike parking provided. There was a question about that. Does this plan include a location for future portables if needed? Yes, a small number are shown near the middle of the site plan between the two parking areas. Okay, now we did get a question in Spanish. Someone said that they were late to the meeting. Sorry, my Spanish isn't super awesome. But we have an opportunity to. I will reach out to this individual personally and get an answer.
If you send me the question, I can help you, Ms. Roth. You hablo
Thank you,
español.
Martha. Yes. And that's you right now. Okay, you should be able to see it now. Okay. All right, if we're already planning for 12 portables, can this school not be modular so we can expand the school at cost neutral and eliminate the modulars? Interesting. Let's go with Martha first and then see if someone can tackle that one.
I still can't see the question. It's not on my end.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Let me just read it to you. Estoy entrando tarde al meeting. Tendremos la oportunidad de encontrar esta reunión en algún enlace, ENLACE, on ocps.net o alguna otra plataforma. Sorry,
well, so they want to know if they're going to be able to see the meeting at a different platform or a different way.
Okay.
So where's the recording going to be posted?
The recording will be posted on the Facilities Communications YouTube page.
Okay, so la reunión esta la están grabando y la va a estar después en YouTube, en la Facilities page. Usted lo puede encontrar en YouTube. Si va al OCPS Facilities, ahí va a encontrar la reunión recordada, el que hizo esa pregunta.
Thank you so much, Principal Chang. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and Lauren, they receive an email from you with that link tomorrow? Don't you normally send out a distribution list, so they'll receive an email version as well?
Yes, absolutely, and it'll also be shared on school board members Lopez's pages as well.
Quieren que sepan que también le van a mandar un email con la información y va a estar en el website de la señora López, la Junta Escolar. La señora López también va a estar la información para después ver la presentación más tarde.
And her social media sites. Social media, Yeah.
En el Facebook o el Twitter de la señora, el miembro de Junta Escolar de la señora López.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so to answer the question about the 12 portables, we are not planning for a permanent requirement for 12 portables. The site plan provides flexibility for portables if needed. The intent is to establish a zone that doesn't permanently exceed school capacity. There was a question if we're going to have charging stations for EVs. I don't believe we know that at this point. If anybody wants to jump in on that, feel free. I don't know who would know.
Lauren, we don't know at this point.
Yeah, so this is a pretty early design stage. So any of these that we're not able to answer, we will come back on the 60%. So Clint, question for you. How are we going to avoid creating congestion on Founders Street?
So we have done a traffic study, just as a little bit more background information. We've got numbers from the Meridian Park development when it's built out. So when there's all the new neighborhoods are done, we have traffic numbers from a previous traffic study that we're using. And we run those numbers and we run simulations, and those numbers have indicated improvements to Founders Street. So it's not going to be able to remain a 2-lane road. It's going to have improvements. It's going to have a free flow right turn lane into the site, all the way from Dowden to the site entrance, and that's going to provide really a lot of storage for cars to get into the site. There's going to be a proposed double left turn lane northbound from Founders Street, or from Dowden to Founders Street. And at the end of the process, it's still in draft mode right now, but there is a traffic study that has all these traffic numbers. It will be part of the public record once the design is complete, and so it will be publicly available at that time. At this point, it's still being coordinated between the design team with Sitkovich and the city of Orlando. But at some point, that traffic study will be publicly available, and you'll be able to see the nuts and the bolts of what went into the traffic projections and what went into the analysis to ensure that congestion is at reasonable levels.
Okay, I did just put my email address and the board member's email address into the chat, because we'll keep answering questions till 7:30, but then I'd like to cut it off for everybody's, to be considerate of everybody's time, including our panelists. So let me see what I can get through in the next 12 minutes, and I just think it's awesome that we have so many great questions. All right, someone requesting that we think about putting solar panels above the parking. I know we have been looking at ways to try to make solar work. That's in its beginning stages. Like there's a technical college we're going to build with some solar panels. So the district is definitely looking for ways to capitalize on renewable energy. I know zoning has not been considered, but what caused the district to determine a new high school will be needed in this area? So briefly, and if anyone wants to jump in and add to it, but the district does have a demographer, and we do track birth rates. Jess, I don't know if you want to jump in on this, but we track birth rates and new development coming in, and actually project how many students are going to be in an area.
Yes, we have an advanced planning committee that evaluates growth in our district on a yearly basis to determine where and when new schools are needed. And that committee is made up of staff that's from student enrollment, including our demographer, who tracks our enrollment, our growth. He projects growth out 10 years. So he's very well aware of where the growth is taking place. And as you guys know, Lake Nona is it's hugely overpopulated. So we're trying to provide a relief school for Lake Nona, and also take into account the growth that's going to be there in the next 10 years and beyond. So that's why it was determined that the relief school is needed, because we have very severe overcrowding at Lake Nona, and there's a lot of growth expected in the area over the next 10 years.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jessma. There was a question about, well, it's kind of a comment and a question about parents being the biggest offenders during pickup. and drop off, is there something in place to keep parents from parking in the neighborhood and have their children be walkers when in reality they are not? Principal Chang, if you're actually still on the line, would it be possible to share what you guys do? Because I think that's going to be a more informative answer than anything I could provide.
So the difference is that I'm on a 6-lane highway with Narcoossee, so I don't really have homes around me. So I don't know how to really answer that question.
Okay.
That's our, I mean, like I got Bravo on one side, Chick-fil-A across the street, and Valencia on the other side. So like I don't know if I'd be a good person to answer that. I don't have homes around me.
Okay, well maybe Commander Durkee can reflect on that a little bit. I mean, I know you've had problems with people even stopping in the middle of Lake Nona Boulevard. I mean, parents, yeah, it is an issue. SROs are super helpful with that, and the principals also set the tone in terms of communicating with parents about what's okay and what's not. That's a good question. Clint, question going back to you, specifically how many cars could be queued if the student entrance was on Dowden? If you could go into that a little bit.
It can't fit the queue. It basically spills back into the Dowden. I mean, you can see it in the picture right now. Look at the distance between Dowden and the school entrance on Founders and Dowden and Founders Street to the entrance where the buses come in. It's about a third of the distance. So there's physically not enough room to provide the queue for the larger movements. And basically it spills back into the intersection and then stops traffic. And then you also get a weave situation because the right lane, the northbound, is free. So people that are inconsiderate and know that the left lane is blocked, they're going to go in the right lane, they're going to speed ahead, and then they're going to whip in front of the people that have been waiting in line for 20 minutes. It's just a physical separation distance. The school has more frontage on Founders, which means longer available queue space.
Thank you. That's actually really interesting. So Mike and all of our other panelists, are there any questions that were sent to you directly, or are there any questions that you saw come across that I haven't read? Because I can't always see everything. So is there anything I've missed? And while making sure I didn't miss anything, please, if I didn't get to your question or if you think of something later, please feel free to be in touch with me and I'll get the question to the right person. My email is Lauren, Lauren, .Roth, which is ROT as in Tom, H as in Harry, @ocps.net. Board member Lopez did have to go, but she actually has 2 representatives from School Board Services who are on the line who are both listening. And she can be reached at Johanna, JOHANNA .Lopez, LOPEZ, @ocps.net. So for those of you who stuck it out to the very end, and to the panelists, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that anyone else on the team, Rory or anybody else, wants to share before we close?
Lauren, hi, this is Mike McGuinn from Ziskowicz. No, you answered and brought in those two questions that were directed towards me, so thank you.
Okay, fabulous. Well, thank you so much to everybody for their time. Do watch out for a link to both the presentation and the video, hopefully online tomorrow. So thanks again, and we'll see you again in a few months for the 60% design meeting. Have a great night.